Today on the Business Builders podcast, we're continuing our series about driving business development, and our topic is monitoring. So we're looking at how to manage and monitor your sales pipeline. Ron talks about the necessity of establishing lead measures to keep you on track, and I talk about the difference between internal and external business development. Well, welcome to the Business Builders podcast. We are your hosts. I am Brenton Gowland.
And I'm Ron Tomlin.
And Ron, been a great little start to this new series. We're talking about, if you've just joined us, business development and driving that within your business. So really excited for these next few episodes, because last week we did planning and that was talking about a business development plan. And now we're going to get into the nitty gritty of getting that plan into action. This week's episode is on monitoring.
Yes. And I'm looking forward to talking about your perceptions in terms of how businesses do that and how they don't do it, more importantly.
But before we get into that, I just wanted to ask you, cabaret festivals in town. We have always a pre-chat, everybody, just before we do these podcasts. And Ron told me he was going to go see a show, but it got cancelled.
Yeah, and probably a good thing too, because I was going to see Kathy Lett's How to Kill Your Husband and Other Useful Tips, but unfortunately they got COVID. Probably fortunately for me.
Yeah, because you and your wife were going to go see that one. Why did you choose that title? Well, it sounds great.
I'm a great fan of Kathy Lett.
Yeah.
And it just seems like a little bit of fun, and maybe my wife could pick up some useful tips.
Yeah, well, sometimes fortune favors the bold, and they got COVID and your wife didn't get to see those tips.
Luckily, we still went and saw Trevor Jones, which is always a festival favorite.
Yeah, look, and if you're listening to us and you're not from Adelaide, Cabaret Festival's here once a year, and it's, I think, the second largest cabaret festival in the world, and it is absolutely fantastic and my favourite time of year. I went to see Marsha Hines and Circus Bonbon last week and not disappointed in any way.
No.
Marsha is amazing. You know, she's almost 70 and she...
Hey, that's fine.
I shouldn't say that out loud, but you can Google it. She's amazing. Yeah. Like, she looks like she's like way younger, and her voice is just amazing. But there you go. There's my fandom coming out at this particular point. So I'll try not to reveal too much of my fandom moving forward. But
it's nice
she was great.
There's people you admire out there. That's fantastic.
She was really good. She did a gospel show, like her influence from when she was a kid with the people that were influential in her life. And it was all based around church at that particular point.
I think Tina Arena has done a fabulous job in putting together another cabaret festival that's just a showstopper. 100% agreed.
Loved it. Anyway, just before we get into the main topic today, let's talk about our sponsors.
So, SA Business Builders.
Yes, a group of business professionals that comes together about once a month to build quality business relationships where, quality business relationships just don't mean selling. It means finding mentors. It means finding people that you can work with. And that doesn't necessarily mean they come into your business, but that you can call them up and say, hey, I need some help with X. And that they're there for you. So those kind of relationships in business. And we'll do a series on networking probably, and the strengths of having different kinds of relationships in business at another point. But that group, SA Business Builders, is an exceptional resource for people. So if you're in Adelaide and you want to join a group that's quite good at finding quality relationships, then reach out to us.
Yes. And of course, Adaptco.
Yes.
That's you.
That's my business. And we're probably about, I said this a while back, we were a few weeks away from having a website. Well, we're getting there. We've got the draft version ready to go. So probably give us another 4 weeks. Me saying that, probably 8, because we got a lot of work on at the moment. But Adaptco basically helps you take control of the marketing within your business. And we work to make ourselves redundant over time and build your in-house capability while we're doing that. So when we leave,
it's so refreshing to hear.
When we leave, and sometimes it takes 6 months, sometimes it takes 12, sometimes it takes a little bit longer, but as we eventually leave, you'll have a marketing capacity within your business that's well managed, and we can always come and check in on you along the way. But that's what Adaptco does. It helps you build your marketing function and grow your business through marketing, which sometimes is sorely missed.
I think in the when you think about a lot of businesses build up around a technical capability, how do they get marketing capability? How do they get business capabilities? Well, oftentimes it's by importing that into the business with people like yourself.
Correct. Okay, and so now we will get into our topic. So this week, Ron, in our series about driving business development within your company, we started by looking at planning. There's 4 things we're going to look at. It's planning, monitoring, aligning, and then winning as a team. So planning your BD. We talked about doing a business development plan in the last episode.
What it looks like and how to do it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Today is all about monitoring, and that really is about sales pipeline management.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that in a second. The other one is aligning. Aligning is all about aligning your team to actually deliver as a team.
Yeah.
And then the last one is winning as a team and the importance of using your whole team to win, not just one person.
Yeah.
So today is monitoring, Ron.
Yeah. And what's really important in this is to understand how your customers buy from you and what process you use to get to those customers. And it's going to be different for different businesses. So building an understanding of your sales funnel or sales pipeline, you can use all sorts of different models, but it's important to individualize that for your business because every business or every industry is going to be slightly different as to how they get to customers.
And I think the place to start is, it's an obvious question, but what is a sales pipeline? And I'll answer that. In my view, and look, if you look it up online, it'll say something similar. It says it's a visualization of your prospect's journey or place in your purchasing process, right? The important word for me is it's a visualization. You got to be able to see it. You were talking about whatever your process is. You got to be able to see, I've got this many clients in bucket A, I've got this many clients in bucket B, and they're moving through, as you said, a funnel.
And aligned with that visualization is measurement.
Yeah.
Being able to measure things. And we'll talk about that later on in terms of lead measures, lead indicators, but being able to visualize it and being able to measure how we're going in each of those steps along the way. And as I said, different organizations, depending on whether they use a CRM or whether they use spreadsheets or whatever, will have different models of how they get a customer. But it's good to get with your business development people or get with your salespeople and find out what the typical process is and be able to map that. And don't theorize it. Work with the people who are doing it to develop what you do along the way to get to the end point, which is a sale, of course. So, for some businesses, like for my business, I can't get a sale without putting a proposal. Work back from that.
So that's going to be one stage of your process.
Yeah. Working back from that. And it's good to think of it sort of from backwards, from the point you want, the end point. And we'll talk about what the end point really is in the model that we're going to use. I have to get a proposal to get a proposal. I have to get a meeting and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think this is actually a very difficult process at all because you just look at your clients that you've got now and do exactly what you were saying earlier. And if you need to, I'm a big fan of actually interviewing clients and going, talk to us about the process. Talk to us about how you found coming on as a client. How did you find out about us? Oh, well, I met your business development manager at, and obviously it's probably going to be the business development managers working on this with someone in the business. And I'm a big advocate for the fact that they should help build these processes. But, this is where we met. This is the process we went through. These are the discussions we had as a business. And the more you know about the clients that you've got now that are really part of your business, the more you can go, oh, okay. So that's the process that we can lead them on. And the other thing you find out in that process is what the lead time is to get a client on board. And sometimes the lead time might be with a certain type of business or product might be 3 to 4 weeks. I've seen lead times that are like 18 months or more. I remember a website we were working on with a client. This is back in the days when I was actively involved in the agency that I own. From the original discussion to actually getting that signed contract was 18 months. Sometimes you got people who are in a real rush. It's 1 month. Sometimes it's 3 to 6 month process. But my point is when you talk to your customers, you start to understand general lead time.
Yeah, absolutely. And two things about that.
Yeah.
One, it will be different depending on the type of relationship you have with customers. If it's more transactional, it's going to be quicker.
Yeah.
If it's more relationship based, it's going to take longer.
Yeah.
Because it takes longer to develop relationships. The second thing is it will change over time.
Yeah.
I know in terms of the work that I do with coaching and mentoring CEOs, it used to be maybe a month between the time I met someone and the time they came on board. Now, it's not unusual for those lead times to extend out to 6 months.
Yeah.
Okay, because it is much more relationship-based. There are other options for them now. So under those circumstances, you need to be sensitive to the fact that these things will change over time.
Yeah. And now, having said that, where we're going to go with this in just a moment is mapping these stages based on what we were just talking about. And understanding the lead time means those people that you're bringing in now are not going to close in this quarter. So you've got to be working at people at different stages of the funnel. So before we get into how we map these stages, we probably should talk about the funnel, and everyone will understand in some fashion what a marketing or sales funnel is.
Yeah.
But you've got a good acronym.
Well, I know in the old days of the advertising industry, when it was literally just the advertising industry, there was no social media in those days. They used the term AIDA. So that was a nice acronym.
Can you spell it for us?
AIDA, and I've added an extra A after talking to you. But AIDA, which for Verity's Opera was an easy way to remember it. Awareness.
Yes.
Interest.
Yeah.
Desire.
Yeah.
And action. You can pick up any marketing book and you'll see the AIDA model in there. It's just as relevant for talking about business development. So first, I've got to get customers to understand that I exist, or I have to be aware of those customers in terms of business development. Then I have to get them interested in the fact that I can do something for them, solve some of their problems. Then I have to develop a desire within them to be talking to me and using me. And somehow that has to translate into action on their part to engage me to do the work for them. The extra A that I've added at the end after talking to you is the stage after we've done some work for them, which is to get them to be advocates of our business.
Yeah, 100%.
So AIDAA is the new AIDA model.
Look, there's a couple of different sales funnels, right? So you've got what's called an inbound marketing sales funnel. And an inbound marketing funnel, and you probably all know what this is anyway, but it's when you don't actually physically have contact, but they're searching on the internet, they find your business, and the online or the inbound marketing funnel usually always has, how do we turn those people into advocates at the end? Because in an online space, if you've got people doing reviews on you or customers who are speaking about you positively online, it does a lot for you. But I think that's so good because a typical BD sales funnel, the stages might be when you map it out inside of a business from a BD perspective, it might be identifying a prospect. So I identify that there's a prospect rather than them discovering us. So I'm the one who's introducing us to them. Then the second stage might be first meeting achieved, right? Because you need to be able to get to the point where you're having a face-to-face. And then it's qualification. You know, are these people someone who should be a client, or do they fit a different bucket? They can become a lead referrer, or they can become some other part of my business cycle, or maybe they're not suitable at all. Yeah. But you don't know that until you've generally had a good old discussion. Then it's follow-up, then it's proposal, then it's closed won. So I've closed and won that, or closed lost. And we'll talk about those things in a minute. But I really like putting in there advocate. So this is taking care, or this is what I call internal BD. So what I've just talked about is external BD, finding new clients. But then if you can turn your customers into advocates and be really passionately involved with your business, you can actually oftentimes get more growth from your existing customers than you can from new customers, because you've already got trust. You have the opportunity to surprise and delight them, which is terms that they use in the inbound marketing kind of jargon. And what I mean by that, practical example, you might have a client that's spending $1 million a year. And I have seen this within businesses that I work in, like in the last year. You focus on some of those clients you've already got. And I think this is the job of BD people. It's not always recognized as this, but you might go and interview them. You might find ways of getting them, making sure that the business delivers on your promise, et cetera, et cetera. But I've seen one company, a client go from being worth $1 million for the last few years to in 1 year becoming worth $3 million to the company. You tell me how many businesses are going to be able to go out and find another $2 million worth of work just like that. But you build your capability with your existing clients. And sometimes growth comes a lot quicker if you do that. You grow with those clients.
And this is when we get to the end, not of this discussion, but talking about your team, is getting everyone to understand that if they are interacting with clients, they are potentially BD people as well.
That's right. And that's why, like you said, it's so important to not just have the BD people in one bucket and they're over there doing this. No, you got to integrate it within your business, because, and I'm not saying that in every business that you'll be able to grow your clients like that, but I think if you focus on the clients you've got, you got a much better chance of fast revenue growth than you have of just finding new clients sometimes.
And it makes sense, because if you're doing good work for a client and they like what you do, of course, they're going to want to see whether you can do more for them because they have other needs as well.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's a synergy between what they need to be done outside the project you're doing for them at the moment, then if you've developed trust and you've developed a good working relationship, you've got the potential to look at more work for that particular client.
Correct.
And it's in both of your interests to do that.
Correct. So again, and what we're trying to do here is just open up the thinking about BD, right? There's internal and there's external, and BD people often should be looking at doing both. How do we grow the clients we've got? Now, back to mapping the sales process. Maybe there's some other examples like of the processes you're talking about how we map that to a pipeline.
For me, like I say, it's the typical I've seen is you start with who's the target market that I'm going to be working with? Who are the players within that market? So the identification of the prospects, getting contact names. And so all of these are activities, getting contact names, contacting those people, finding out the right people in the organization to actually talk to, then meeting with those people, then putting a proposal to those people or qualifying them and putting a proposal to them, and then hopefully getting work out at the end. Each one of those are defined activities. And you know from experience and talking to your own internal staff, what sort of conversion rates you're typically getting on each one of those. You know, so for instance, if you start at the end, like I suggested, maybe my business needs 5 sales a month to stay in business. If I need 5 sales a month, how many proposals do I need to have out there to get those 5 sales?
Now we're getting into lead measures.
Yes, absolutely. So if, let's say, I've got a 50% conversion rate, I need 10 proposals out there if I want to get the 5 sales. And let's just make things easy. Let's say it's a month that it takes for those sales to come on board after a proposal. Let's say it takes a month between the meeting and a proposal going out, and I've got a 50% conversion rate on that, then I need, pretty simple maths. If I need 10 proposals to go out, I need 20 meetings a month. If I need 20 meetings a month, how many contacts do I need to have contacted? Let's suppose it's a 50% conversion. I contact a person, 50% of them I get a meeting. Then I need 40 contacts a month. All right. If I need 40 contacts a month and I've got a 50% conversion on identification, I need 80 contacts a month to be able to get in 6 months' time to be able to get the 5.
Yeah.
So getting down to the pipeline that you were talking about for measures, am I measuring along the way how many contacts I'm getting a month? Or how many prospects I'm getting a month? How many contacts that translates into? How many meetings that translates into? How many proposals that translates into? And how many sales that actually generates? I need to measure each one of those points of interaction along the way. So you're measuring activity. Now, usually measuring activity, you say this, that doesn't give you the end point. No, but you're getting an indication of what are things going to be like given the lead time of 6 months between actually identifying somebody and getting a sale.
Yeah, it's really interesting what you're saying because, yes, the lead measures, and we'll map those out and we can tick boxes and go, yes, I've got my 8 meetings a week, and that then starts to materialize as actual proposals, as you were talking about, et cetera, et cetera. But the other thing it enables us to do, we can start to put figures on. We think we're having conversations with client X. We think that the piece of work that we're talking about might be rough order of magnitude worth about X, right? So as you can start to project, and of course, until you've done the proposal, you can't narrow it down, but you can get a good gut instinct. So let's say our pipeline is identify prospect, first meeting achieved, qualification, factory tour, because we've worked out that if we give someone a factory tour, they're 70% more likely to become a client. So whatever that process is, we map it out. But as we go along, we'll start to get a good view on how much that client's worth. And once we've put that into whatever our mechanism is for recording this, we can start to get an understanding of the value of our pipeline at each stage as well.
Absolutely. And if as you get more sophisticated, you can put probabilities into that. There's a feel that there's some type of good working relationship here, even though we haven't started working together. I've got a good feeling about this client. I reckon there's an 80% probability that we'll get him across the line.
Yeah.
Because we've got to the proposal stage now. And yeah, I think that's pretty solid.
Sometimes just even putting them in a different bucket. Remember we talked earlier about it's visualizing. So whatever your tool is, you visually put them in that bucket. And we know that if we get them to a certain bucket, that their likelihood of becoming a client increases. Because any funnel, you've seen them, top end of the funnel is very broad. We got lots of people and we filter, and you end up with less people down the far end.
And I don't think you should underestimate the value of going through the process with clients, because not all clients are the type of clients you want.
That's correct.
For good reason. I mean, they might be, they're not the type of people that we work with because we can't add as much value.
Yeah.
Or they're not the type of people we work with because they don't communicate in the way that we appreciate or we like to do it. Or they rub people up the wrong way.
Yeah. And I think that's part of the qualification process too. You know how one of those stages we talked about is qualification. Like I work in a couple of businesses and they don't actually have qualification as part of their sales pipeline, right? Or their funnel. And because as you said, what generally happens is it becomes obvious over time based on interaction because they're really trying to screw us down on price, right? As part of the process. That's always a great indicator that it's a race to the bottom. Do you really want a client like that? If it's volume, maybe. If it's not volume, is it worth the pain?
Or the other thing too is that you can modify your processes to deal with that type of client in a different way.
And that's interesting because you might update those processes over time through practice and review.
Oh, absolutely. And that, then we're going to get into continuous improvement, and I don't want to go there at the moment because that's a whole nother area. But it's continuous improvement in business development is just as important as manufacturing or service delivery.
Absolutely. So let's just recap just quickly. So we've talked a bit randomly all over the place about sales pipeline, but the sales pipeline is a visualization of your prospect's journey through your sales process. And then we talked about mapping out that sales process, which could be all sorts of different things. If you've got factory tours, maybe that's worth mapping in your sales process that you get them to that point. If you don't have factory tours, maybe it's just a generic thing, as we talked about earlier. But then you've been talking about we put lead measures because to monitor, which is what we're talking about today, our business development, you need to have a sales pipeline where you can visualize. Because why do we visualize, Ron? What's your view on that?
Well, it just makes it easier for everybody to understand where we're at any given time.
So the boss can actually come in and have a look and go, I've got a certain level of confidence, right? But you know how I was talking about putting those figures on things? It might not be until, these are usually in columns or Kanban charts, people use very often for pipelines or spreadsheets. But stage 1 and stage 2, there might be no figure attached. It's just a whole bunch of names and businesses and why. Stage 2, first meeting achieved. It's after that when you get to follow up, because after the first meeting, you might have an idea of what this client could be worth. Therefore, that becomes a figure. So you start to get, well, in this stage of the pipeline, we've got this amount of value. In this stage, this amount. Now, as you said, when you have some sophistication around your pipeline, you can then see that I can close a certain percent, let's say it's 30%, therefore have a really high level of confidence that the business cash flow is going to be X. So your sales pipeline actually gives confidence to the whole business, which is why the business development role is so important.
Yeah. And the other side of the coin too is being able to measure this stuff or going through the process of putting numbers to it gives you an indication of where in your pipeline you might be falling down.
That's correct.
It might be that, the problem is we're not meeting enough people. Because when we meet people and we have a discussion with them, we get 80% across the line.
Yep.
But it might also be that our proposals aren't up to scratch.
Yeah.
So we meet a lot of people, but we don't get them over the line with our proposals. So that's what we need to improve.
So this brings me down to what we started talking about earlier. In a typical BD sales pipeline, at the end, you'll have close won, like if you're using a CRM, for example, or you'll have close lost. So it's very obvious. If you've won it, excellent, blah, blah, blah. You research and go, well, why did we win this? But many people don't ask that question. A more important question to answer is, why did we lose this? So people get I remember the feeling of disappointment when you miss out on a thing, but you get used to as a BD person realizing you win some, you lose some. But the really important thing is, what can you learn from the opportunities that you haven't closed? Because that's where that continuous improvement part comes in. I would, as a BD person, ask as many questions as you can. And it's why it's important to keep a good relationship and not eat sour grapes, to find out from those people, because they are the clients that you don't close are the biggest source of truth for how to improve this process, in my view.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it falls back to the same issue that a lot of organizations have with complaints. They look at complaints and they go, I don't want to talk to those people. Complaints are a fabulous source of improvement for organizations.
Oh, they are.
Yeah. And if you like, by not buying from you, it's a sort of complaint. So treat it as gold and look at the opportunity for learning from it.
Think about this. You can also learn so much about your competitors, because often when you don't win something, it's because they've gone somewhere else. So, well, why did you go to competitor X? Well, because they this, that, and the other. Great. Let me write that down, because we can improve in those areas. Just gold, right? But yeah, that's why it's important to have a healthy visualization of your sales pipeline. And I find that a lot of businesses do not have that. Now, the tools, we've talked about CRMs, and we can go into details about CRMs later, but at the end of the day, the beauty of a CRM...
Customer Relationship Management System.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I just assumed everyone knows what that is. It's basically a big spreadsheet that means you don't lose anything, but you can build intelligence into this spreadsheet. So a good CRM will flag with you when you need to go talk to someone, tell you the last time you've had a conversation, measure where they're at in the sales pipeline. They're very, very good tools if they're used correctly. But I find most people get a CRM and then it sits on the shelf.
Yeah, it's a waste.
So at bare minimum, you want to have a spreadsheet. You can use SharePoint, you can use whatever, but you need some way of tracking.
Yeah, and to my way of thinking, when you're starting off in this area, keep it simple. You'll build sophistication into it as you get more information about what your pipeline actually looks like. And as you said before, don't underestimate the power of talking to customers about their journey, how they made decisions along the way, because that will give you indications of where and how you can influence other customers in the future.
And look, if you are using a spreadsheet, it's just, and this is, I'm going to speak 101 for a minute. It's you set up 5 or 6 columns, and at the top of one column, it's like prospect identified, list their name. Second column, it might be, as we said, first meeting achieved, list their name. You treat the spreadsheet like a Kanban chart, and then you can just add one little column next to each column with the value as you start to understand them. And you were talking about, you could put a percentage close column. And if you need help with this, again, reach out and we'll find a spreadsheet for you. There's heaps of them out there. But what's massively important is that you actually have this pipeline, and that not only that, but other people have access to it, because that is when, like your boss, that's when you start to have some responsibility. Responsibility also drives us, right? Accountability, let's call it.
And the truth of the matter is, you have a pipeline whether you monitor it and control it or not.
Yeah.
It's just whether you're in control, whether you're managing it, or whether it's managing you.
Which is why I bring us back to that word. It needs to be a visualization so you can see where you're at any particular point. Because if you don't have a visualization, you lose opportunities. Things drop through the cracks. They,
not just for you, but for your team.
Yeah.
Everyone can see the same thing.
And remember what we were saying earlier, there's a massive importance of BD people, that role within a business, because if a pipeline is presented correctly, it gives intelligence to the business so they can make better business decisions more confidently. And when it's all working, it's literally a beautiful thing.
That's my experience anyway.
There you go.
Yeah.
So just in recap, we talked a lot there. We went a bit all over the place, but what we're basically saying is, if to monitor your business development plan and its activities, you need to have a sales pipeline that you manage effectively. And to fill the sales pipeline, you need to establish some lead measures that you can also record so that you know that you're tracking correctly. And the beautiful thing with lead measures is, once you've got them down and you see that you're not getting the right result, or you are getting the right result, you then can analyze those lead measures and go, what is the thing I'm doing? Am I going to enough networking events? Am I having enough meetings? Am I making enough phone calls? Or whatever the initiative is, you can see what's working and what's not, and then focus more on those things that are working. So the idea of recording those lead measures is so that you can actually see how they play out. So 2 things in monitoring: sales pipeline and lead measures that you track.
And if you do those things, you're ahead of most other businesses out there.
You really are. So there you go. That's our episode for this week. We hope you found it useful. So that is, we started off with planning. This was monitoring. And the next episode, which is in 2 weeks' time, is going to be all about aligning your team, which is basically what Ron was just getting at a little bit earlier. So we're starting to see the importance of it.
We're getting ahead of ourselves, but that's because
okay.
These things are interrelated. Sometimes you can't help that.
Yeah. And the message that I really want to get out there is, because sometimes, and I'll say this out loud, sometimes BD can be underappreciated because they're the people who go out and sometimes they're called Sir Lunch-a-Lot. Have you ever heard of a BD person called Sir Lunch-a-Lot?
I might have been called that in my time.
Yeah, very good. But what I'm starting to really want to do is highlight the importance of this role and the critical nature of this role to a business. And if it's done well, if you're in a BD role, you can develop, if you're a CEO who's listening to us, and even if there's just a couple of things you think, oh, right, well, I really need to start to establish the management of a sales pipeline so it's not just seen by the BD person, but it's socialized through the right people in the business. It starts to add immense value to your business. And as you were saying earlier, some level of sophistication.
Yeah. And like I said, most organizations don't do this. So you're streets ahead, even if you start with a spreadsheet.
Okay. So that's us for this week.
Yep. That's all from me.
And that is all from me. So look, if you're out there and you're listening, we would really encourage you to go rate us on Apple Podcasts. If you're enjoying the show, that really helps us out a lot. So we're asking you to help us out by giving us a rating. And if you want to reach out and give us any advice or feedback on the show, we find that really valuable, don't we, Ron?
Absolutely. And if you've got any ideas for what you'd like us to explore in the future, please reach out as well.
Yeah, that'd be great. So until next time, it is bye from me.
And bye from me.